Hello, I'm Greg and welcome to my channel, Midnight Oil Software. Today I'm going to continue working on my remake of the classic Moon Patrol game. Moon Patrol, as I mentioned in previous streams, was a arcade classic that was released in 1982. And according to Wikipedia, it's one of the first arcade games ever to feature a full parallax scrolling in a 2D scrolling game. I also found out that it was a top 5 grossing arcade games by December of 1983. So it did really well when it was in the arcade. So anyway, what I plan to do today, in the previous stream, we added our terrain and procedural terrain generation. I created prefabs for normal terrain and for craters. And I wrote a terrain scrolling script that would scroll the terrain across the screen. Let me just demonstrate that really quick here. And I also added game music to it. So I'll click play here and just get caught up with what we did last stream as we wait for it to build and run here. Ooh. Well, that's different. Yeah, so we've got our background that doesn't scroll, the distant background that scrolls by slowly, the closer background that scrolls a little bit faster, and then the terrain, which is what we added last week. So we've got normal terrain and we've got craters, and you're scrolling by. If we switch to the scene view, you'll see that as the terrain scrolls off the screen and collides here, it's despawned, and then new terrain tiles are spawned off screen to scroll into view. So the agenda for today is we want to add our buggy. So we're going to add the body, we're going to add wheels, which will be independent of the body, and they'll be connected to the body via a really cool component called Wheel Joint 2D. We're also going to add some ability to jump over the craters, and we'll implement the guns on the buggy so you can shoot your lasers. I plan to add some cool thrust animation, so I don't want it to just jump without any explanation for why it's jumping. So I'm going to put some thrusters on the bottom of the buggy, and when you jump, it's actually firing those thrusters. And I'm going to add a visual animation for that and some sound effects. And I also want to implement what happens when you crash into a hazard. I want to have the buggy explode and send pieces of debris flying. In the classic Moon Patrol game, the tires would go bouncing away. So I want to try and do that. So jumping right into Unity today, the first thing we want to do is we want to pull in the art for our buggy. Now, I mentioned last week that I forgot to pull in the tires. So let me go ahead and grab my art for the wheels and pull them in. And so, yeah, there's my buggy wheel. And I want to just scale those sprites down a little bit. So by default, when I pull them into Unity, they're setting their max height to 2048, and I don't need them to be that big, so I'll scale them down to 512. And also, if I was to drag this into the scene, that's a little bit too big. So the other thing I want to do is change these pixels per unit to 250, which, yeah, I think that looks like a much better scale for our game. So let's see. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Okay, so we're going to want to create a prefab for this guy. I'm going to rename this NinjaEggBuggy. And I know that I'm going to want a polygon collider. And I know I'm going to want a rigid body. And I think that's probably good for now. So we're going to drag that into my prefabs folder. let's see. Let's create a folder in here and call it Moon Patrol. And I'm going to drag that guy right in there. And I'll delete that. So now I can just spawn him into a scene as a prefab. Now we're going to add the wheels. So let me go back to my art. And I'm going to drag this buggy wheel in. And I'm just going to roughly place him. It doesn't really matter where I put him at this point, because the wheel joint is going to align him to the right place on the vehicle. So for now, I'm going to put it just down a little bit because I want to be able to see where I'm putting the wheel joint. So let's see, we're going to add, I'll add a rigid body to him. We'll add a polygon collider to him. And then this component that I'm about to add, I think this is a really cool component. And I just learned about this when I was investigating how I wanted to implement this game. And it is the wheel joint 2D component. So this component, well, first of all, it's going to anchor it to the rigid body of the car. But it's also going to simulate suspension, and you can also simulate a motor, so that this wheel will actually spin as if driven by a motor, and it will propel the vehicle over terrain. So let me go ahead and configure this guy. So we want to select the rigid body that it's going to be anchored to. Now, you see this little, scroll out a little bit, this little point here, that's where it's anchoring it. It's anchoring it to the pivot point of the body of the vehicle, which is not really what I want. So what you can do is turn off this auto configure connection, and then I can drag this anchor, let's see, actually let me draw the connected anchor down. I want it to anchor right about there, maybe. And then I believe that I want this to be, oops, anchored in the center of the wheel. I can't zoom in because of my camera. I think that's good enough right there. If I hit play and then grab this guy and pull him up, well, that's giving me some really bizarre behavior, probably because I have some weird settings on the on this stuff here, because I haven't adjusted that yet. But I'm going to go with that for now. My settings for that damping ratio, this thing basically is how much it damps the oscillation of the suspension. So right now the suspension is set at a frequency of 2. I'm going to bump that up to 8. And then I think I'm going to set this to be about 0.5. And then I'm also going to make this a child of the buggy. And I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times. And I'm going to rename this one rear or back wheel. I think would be a good name. And then I'm going to rename this one middle wheel. And we're going to want to move that one. And I'm going to want to edit its anchor points. So it looks like it moved the anchor with it. That's good. So the connected anchor, I just want to move the X position over. I think that looks good. And then this will be the front wheel. Okay. We'll move him over here, and I'll move that anchor point over there, roughly. I think that might be good. All right, let me drag him up. Basically, I want him to fall onto the terrain and see what happens. Oops. Why is he... Oh, I think I need to set his layer to be player. Oop, got to stop playing. Layer, player. Okay, so he definitely collides with the terrain. I think those tires are riding a little high. So I'm going to go to these guys, and I'm going to move all of their connected anchors down a little bit. Let me see what that looks like. Well, I got to remember to stop playing before I make adjustments. That looks a little bit better. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to turn off my scrolling. I gotta stop playing. Turn off my scrolling. Okay, good. And now we can play around with this guy's motor. If we say use motor, and then give him a motor speed, like, I don't know, what should he be? I think maybe 1,000. Okay, so I like that. So let me explain these parameters. So this is the speed in meters per second, and then this is the maximum amount of force that's applied to achieve that motor speed. So it's going to apply this much force and ramp up to that speed. It'll start out at not moving and then ramp up to this speed. And then these things are just to have it break the joint. If it's set to infinity, those joints will never break. So it can break by force, like if it collides with something. It can also break by torque. Like if you spin the wheel too fast, the joint can break. I'm going to move him back. Oops. I'm going to move the buggy back. And now he should go scrolling right across the terrain. Was I not playing when I set those parameters? Use motor. Okay. So he's rolling across the terrain and he's bouncing. Now, I mentioned in the... I'm going to actually save this as a prefab. Let's see. Prefabs, minigames, Moon Patrol. I'm going to save it as a prefab, and I'm going to rename that to BuggyWheel. Anyway, I'm going to override my prefab with that. I mentioned in the previous video that I want to do something a little bit unconventional. So instead of having the buggy drive across the terrain and have the camera follow the buggy and have the terrain scroll in relation to the camera, I mentioned that I'm going to have the terrain scroll, and then I'm going to have a fixed camera, And I'm going to keep the buggy in a fixed position. So, did his rotation change? Let me zero that out. I got to stop playing. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. So let me go back to my terrain manager, set my scroll speed to -2, move my buggy to about, I can't remember where the terrain, how high the terrain is, but I'll just set him here for now. And then we don't want him to drive across the terrain anymore. So I need to go into his rigid body, and I want to freeze his position on the x-axis. And I will override my prefab, hit play. So I'm going to have to play around with those settings because I don't like how he's bouncing like crazy. It's also going to be interesting to see what he does when he hits the crater here. So that's kind of interesting. I think one thing I can do is I can freeze his rotation. Let me think about that. Is that really what I want to do? I want to think about how I want to handle that so that he doesn't bounce up and down so much. Yeah, I think I want to do that. So we're going to have to start by adding a script to this guy. So let's see, I'm going to switch over to my NinjaEggBuggy component. I'm going to add that NinjaEggBuggy script to him. And then I'll open up that script in Visual Studio. And first thing I'll do is I'll move that to the correct namespace. Kind of keep my code organized. And I know I'm going to want to cache the rigid body because I'm going to use the rigid body to set, to freeze his rotation. So in the awake method, I'll go ahead and cache that rigid body, get rid of that private keyword. I really need to edit the default template so it doesn't put that private keyword on there. So there I'm caching the rigid body. I'll generate a member variable for it. Again, delete that private keyword. So in the start method, I'll call a method called start game. I like to break things out into separate methods. Because I might want to call this start game at other times than when the script first starts. So what am I going to want to do in start game here? Well, I know I want to freeze the rotation. Is there anything else I want to do in here? I think that's probably good for now. So I'll switch back over to Unity. Hit play. And so now he should no longer be rocking back and forth. while he's rolling across the terrain. Let's see what he does when he falls in the crater. So, of course, I will eventually have him die when he hits the crater. And I think he's scrolling, the train's scrolling a little bit too slow, so I'm going to speed that up a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. All right, good. So let's see, what's next here? I'm trying to think about what I want to do next. So one thing I know I'm going to want to do is I want a way to tell if the buggy is grounded or not. Because there's some different things that are going to come into play here. I only want to be able to jump if the buggy is touching the ground. And I might also use that grounded flag to determine whether or not I want to freeze the rotation. I'm going to have to think about that. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and add a Boolean here for grounded. And in start game, I'll go ahead and set that to true. And one way to tell if I'm grounded is just to see if I've collided with the terrain. So I'll add an onCollisionEnter2D handler here. And I'm probably also going to want to put colliders on the wheels and have the wheels defer their collision handling to the buggy, because the wheels are going to also collide with the ground or hazards or other things. So I'm going to, instead of handling the collision in here, I'm going to add a method here and call it handle collision. And I'll make that public so that the wheels can actually call this when they get a collision. And yeah, that way the wheels can let the parent know that they've touched the ground or that they collided with a hazard. So what I want to do in here, if I'm colliding with the terrain, and the way you do that is I'm going to check the layer of the game object that I collided with. And I'm going to use the layer mask name to layer method and grab the terrain layer. And if that's the layer I'm colliding with, then I should be able to set grounded to true here. And I think I'm going to move that into a method instead of setting the variable directly, because there might be other times I want to set grounded, and I might want to do some other things when I'm grounded besides just setting that flag. And I'll add a note here that I want to handle collisions with hazards as well. Make that a to-do. So I'll generate a method for set grounded. Get rid of that private keyword. And so yeah, I know I'm going to want to set that grounded variable. And I'll go ahead and freeze the rotation here if I'm grounded. Do I want to do that? I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm going to have to think about this. I might have my freeze rotation logic backwards. I'm trying to think about what I want to do. I might want to allow a little bit of rotation while I'm going across the terrain, and then when I jump, freeze it, so I don't have any weird behavior when I'm jumping. But for now, I think I'm just going to leave that and not do anything with it. Yeah, I don't want to set it to true. I want to pass in whether or not I'm grounded. And then up where I was explicitly setting that grounded variable, I'll just call set grounded. Yeah, I think that's what I want to do there. right, so that looks good. Now in the update method, I'm going to check for some input here, but ultimately I'm probably going to have a separate component to handle input because I might want to have different ways of getting input. But for now, let's see, I'm at a serialized field. And I want to get a reference to the game manager here. I want to set that to null, not false. I assign it to null because, as I said before, I don't want to have any compiler warnings in my console. And so I only want to check for input if we're playing. Otherwise, I'm just going to return out of here. And again, in the future, I'll probably have a separate component for checking for input. But for now, I'm going to deliberately incur some technical debt, and I'm just going to check for input in here. So if I'm grounded, and you click the left mouse button, then I want to jump. So we want to handle jumping here. So I just call a method here called jump. So just looking at that logic, if we're playing, if we're not playing, we'll just return out of here. But if we're playing and we're grounded and we click the left mouse button, then let's jump. And so what do we want to do in jump? I'm going to just move this down. I like to put my private methods down below the Unity callbacks and the public methods. So first of all, when I jump, I know I want to say I'm not grounded anymore. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to be able to jump while I'm in the air. I don't want to be able to keep jumping and adding force after I've gotten off the ground. So the way we'll jump is I'm just going to add force. I'm going to add it in the up direction. And I'm going to have to use a variable here called jump force, which I'll create, and that'll be a serialized field. Go ahead and generate a field for that. Move that up there, get rid of that private keyword, add serialized field attribute. And I should give it a default value. Actually, I don't want that to be a vector 2 either. I think I want that to be a float. The actual jump force I'm applying will be a vector 2, but I think that I want the jump force to be a float. Yeah, let me change that to a float. And let's see, I'll give it a default value. I'm not really sure how much it'll take. We'll start with 1,000. So let's see, does that look right? Vector 2 up times force, I think that looks right. So update it in the inspector. Got to add a reference to my game manager. I think that all looks good. Let's hit play and see if I can jump. Yay! Well, oh, the first jump worked. But so I'm setting grounded to false when I jump, and I never set it back. That seems to indicate that the collider is not working correctly. We're supposed to be setting it back to false when I collide with the terrain. And I also don't feel like I jumped high enough. So I want to give that a little bit more jump force. Let's go down and look at this logic for... See if I can jump more than once. So I set grounded to false. I apply my force and handle collision. I'm setting grounded to true. It seems like that should work. Yeah, duh. like I mentioned, I want to have the wheels handle their collisions and defer them to the parent vehicle and let the parent vehicle handle the collision. So I need to create a script and add it to the wheel. We'll call that BuggyWheel. And we will apply that to the wheel. And let's open that thing up. Set the namespace. Okay, and how do I want to handle this? I definitely need a reference to the parent vehicle. So that would be NinjaEggBuggy. Parent vehicle. Assign it to null to avoid compiler warnings. And why am I getting a compiler error up there? So let's see, on collision enter 2D. What's wrong with this reference here? It might help if I actually put that inside the class definition. All right, so now all I really need to do in this script is handle on collision, and I'm just going to defer the collision handling to the parent vehicle. So I'll call the parent vehicle's handle collision method, pass in the collision parameter, and that should be all we need to handle this collision. Go ahead and add that script. Assign the parent vehicle. I thought I made a prefab for that. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Hit play, and let's see if I can jump more than once. Yay, I got it working. I'm still not jumping as high as I would like, though. Although it does seem to be enough to get me over the craters. Ooh, that one might not have been enough. Yeah, I don't think that's enough jump force. I didn't persist my change. This should jump a little higher. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better. Something else I thought about, I might want to play around with the gravity factor on the rigid body for this buggy. I mean, if you're on the moon, there really should be less gravity than you would have on Earth, but I think for now I'm going to leave it as it is. I might play around with that later. So I'm pretty happy with that overall. I think the next thing I want to do, you know, I mentioned that I don't want it to just jump for no reason. I want to add some thrusters to the buggy, at least a visualization of some thrusters, so that when you hit the jump button, the thrusters fire, and it's obvious that the thrusters are propelling the buggy up into the air. And so I'll have an animation. I'll probably use the same thrust animation that I used for my Ninjaroids game, for the actual player ship. I think that's a pretty good thrust. And I also want to have a sound effect. Let's see, do I have a prefab for that thrust? I don't seem to. So let me just open up the NinjaEgg ship. Let me look at him. There's a sound effect I can use, a thrust sound effect. There at the bottom, and you can see on the sprite, I have that little thrust visualization. So let me open up that guy. Oh yeah, so I called it exhaust. So I have a little game object on that ship called exhaust that I can just turn on and off, and it's got a sprite renderer with an animator. So I think I can just reuse that and reuse it on my buggy. So I'll probably, if I don't already have one, I'll want to create a prefab for that. So let me just drag that down into my prefabs folder. Do I want to rename that? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, I can add that to my buggy, and I can just turn that on and off when I hit jump and when I get grounded. I actually might put it on a timer. So let's see, I open up my buggy. I'm going to create an empty game object here, and I'm going to call that thrust. I'm going to drag the exhaust onto it. And I might actually have multiple ones of this. I'll put them in between the wheels. I think that would look good. So it looks like there's a couple of thrusters firing from underneath of the buggy. So I'll just duplicate this. And I'll just move it over. I like that. So if I hit play, it should just be on. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'll turn it off by default. I only want it to be on when I'm jumping. So let's go into our script. And I'm going to want to add a serialized field for that. Yeah, let's call it, what, thrust visualization. I think that's pretty descriptive. And then in jump, I'll just set active true. And then I just need to determine when I want to turn it off. I mean, a couple of options are I could turn it off when I collide back with the ground, but I think I might prefer to use a timer because I want you to stop thrusting before you start coming down. I think that would look more realistic. So you jump, the thrusts fire, you go up, the thrusters turn off, and you start to fall back down again. Yeah, I think that would make the most sense and look the most realistic. So let's just add a method here. We'll call it disable thrust visualization. Visualization. And all I have to do is set active false. And then I can use invoke to call that after a delay. Why am I getting a compiler error there? Name of is definitely a component of C#. I'm not missing a using reference or anything. What am I missing here? This is probably something really simple. You probably already see what it is and you're yelling at me. Yeah, it's definitely not a missing using statement. I mean, I could spend some time trying to fix this. Or I could just use a string constant, which I absolutely hate. Oh, I have an extra paren here. I wonder if that was the problem. Duh. Okay, I was putting the float inside the name of. Yeah, there is no name of method that took a string and a float. All right. So let's see. Invoke disable thrust visualization after 3/4 of a second. I think that should be fine. I could possibly make that a variable, but I don't really foresee needing to change that. So let's see what happens when I hit play. Jump. Oh. Why didn't it turn my thruster on? Well, what's this null reference? Oh, did I forget to assign my... I forgot to assign my thrust game object. Okay, let's try it again. Jump. Yay! I like that. So the thrusters fire and I jump up in the air. Very cool. Very cool. I like that. Crash. That's where I should die right there. I don't like the fact that the thrusters appear in front of the vehicle though. So I'm going to go into the sprite renderers and I'm going to move them back on the layer just so they appear behind the vehicle. I think that would look better. But of course I need to turn it off by default and only turn it on when I jump. Yeah, that's better. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so we got jumping working. We've got the jump visualization working. I guess the next thing would be to add a sound effect. And I know I've already got an audio clip I can use from NinjaEggBuggy. So let's add an audio source. This is very, very simple. So the audio source will be applied to that thrust game object. And I'm going to route it to my level sounds channel. So maybe I'll demonstrate the audio mixer here. Where is that? That's up here under window, audio mixer. So I have an audio mixer and I have different groups under here. I only have one group. It's called master, but under master, I've got different channels per se. I've got game music, NinjaEggBuggy sounds, monster sounds, environment sounds, level sounds. I have the Mark Kistler audio clips that I play when I display a puppet of Mark Kistler. And then add mix is only because I use the add mix plugin for in-game ads. And if I put in a video ad, it might play audio, and I don't really want that playing over top of my game audio, and so I just route it to its own channel, and I turn the volume all the way down to kind of get around that. But at any rate, that is the audio mixer. Yeah, I just want to show you that. So you'll see in the audio source, when I route it to level sounds, it's going to this channel here. And the audio mixer allows me to balance the different volume, the sounds for the different things in a way that's pleasing. I might expose that through a setting screen at some point. But for now, I'm just going to route this output of this audio clip to level sounds. And then we need the audio clip for this. And I mentioned I should already have one from NinjaEggBuggy that I can use. Thrust. So I should just be able to drag that right into the audio clip field. And I want it to play on awake. So that's good. And I want it to loop. So that should do it. And it will automatically play when I enable that game object because the audio source is applied to that game object. So turn that game object on and get to play this sound here. Thrust. So yeah, that should work pretty darn well. So, oh yeah. Yep, so I hit jump. I get my visualization, plays the sound effect. Yeah, that works pretty good. I think it's a little bit loud though. So go in here, I'm going to turn this volume down some. And I might also play with the pitch. I don't know, it seems like a pretty low frequency rumble, which I think I might want a little higher pitched sound for this effect. But yeah, I like that volume better. Let's increase the volume of the, or not the volume, increase the pitch of the sound. Oh no, that's too high. Maybe a little happy medium here. That's probably a little bit better. I think I can live with that. Yeah, I think that's good volume, good pitch. Of course, since I made that change while I was playing, it's not persistent, so I've got to go bump it down. All right. So I think, what's the next thing I want to do? Let's take a look at my agenda here. Okay, so we've got our wheels, got the jumping and firing, or actually, we've got the jumping and the jump thrust animation and with sound effects. I think we want to add the ability to shoot. So yeah, we want to add the ability to shoot out of the two guns that are on the buggy. There's a gun that shoots up, and there's a gun that shoots forward. And there's a couple of different ways I can do this. I think the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to add a couple of game objects for the guns. We'll start with the top gun. No pun intended. So this is the gun that shoots straight up. And I'm going to position this at the muzzle of that gun. So basically this is just the point at which the bullet's going to originate. So when I spawn a bullet, I'm going to spawn it at this position right here. And that's the only purpose of this game object, is to give me a point, a location at which to spawn the bullet. And I'm going to duplicate that, and we're going to move it over in front of the muzzle of the gun that shoots forward. Let me zoom in a little bit, get a better view of that. Oops. Don't want to zoom in so far that I'm behind the camera. Okay, so I think that looks good. I got the point for where it comes out the top gun, the point where it comes out the front gun. Yeah, I'm happy with those positions. Okay, so now we'll go into our buggy and we'll open up our script. Okay, so let's think about what we want to do in here. I know we're going to want some serialized fields to reference the different things we need to shoot those bullets. We're going to want a bullet prefab, for instance, that we can spawn. And we're going to want to have some references to that top gun and forward gun objects. But let's start with the bullet prefab. We'll add a serialized field. Bullet prefab is just a game object. And I assign it to null so I don't get compiler warnings. Add another one here. And I want to play an audio clip when I fire. So we'll have a fire sound. And let's add another one here. I want to have a delay between when I fire. I don't want the player to be able to just hold down the fire button and have just a rapid fire coming out. I want to have a little bit of delay in between each shot. So I'm going to have a configurable delay here. between shots. And so what I'll do is when I click the fire button, I'll set a countdown that'll start with this delay, and then in the update method I'll decrement that counter, and I won't let you shoot again until that counter gets down to 0. That'll keep you from just being able to fire ridiculously fast. And so let's see, we got our bullet prefab, we've got our fire sound, we've got our fire delay. It's time to think about how we're going to trigger this fire. So down in the update method, which is where we're handling our input, I'm going to want to add a check for the right mouse button. So we'll say input dot get mouse button down 1. So that would be the right mouse button. And I'll just call fire bullets. Generate that method. I'll move that down under the jump method. Get rid of that private keyword. And so what do we want to do when we fire bullets? Well, we want to make sure that we're in that the gun has finished cooling down. So we'll add a private float here, fire cooldown, initialize it to 0. Go ahead and initialize it to 0 and start. So when we call our fire bullets method, we'll check to see if our cooldown is greater than or equal to 0, and if it is, then we'll return. So that means the gun's still cooling down, and we're not ready to fire again yet. Assuming that it is cooled down, we'll reset fire cooldown to be our fire delay. So we won't fire again until that counts down again. Now we want to make sure that we decrement that cooldown counter. So in here in update, at the top of the update method, I'll just decrement fire cooldown by time.delta time. So that'll take care of the cooldown timer. Every time we come into update, every frame will decrement that. All right, so if the laser is not cooled down, we'll return. Otherwise, we'll reset the timer. And so this is where we want to actually fire the bullet. So we're going to spawn a game object, call it bullet, and we'll use our object pooler. Got to add my using statement. And we'll spawn our bullet prefab. And we don't want to enable it yet. So we're going to want to set the position of the bullet. So where do we want to spawn the bullet? And we're going to do these guns separately. So I actually need to add serialized fields for the top gun and forward gun, which we haven't done yet. So I've got a serialized field here for the top bun. And we'll add one for the forward gun. You know, Visual Studio's autocorrect. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's a little frustrating. Okay, so I'm probably going to refactor this at some point and move those guns out of the buggy and have them be separate components, because for one thing, I'm getting an awful lot of serialized fields in here. And then the other thing is I'm going to have to actually fire twice inside this fire bullets method. You know, once for the top gun and once for the forward gun. If they were each their own component, I wouldn't have to do anything in the buggy. Each gun would take care of firing itself. So this would help adhere more closely to the single responsibility pattern. This class, this NinjaEggBuggy class, really shouldn't be responsible for firing the bullets. But I'm going to deliberately incur some technical debt here. I'm going to have another video in the future where I refactor and clean this stuff up. But for now, just for the sake of simplicity, we'll just go ahead and implement it in this class. So I'm going to assign the top gun's position to that bullet's position. Which for the top gun, I think is just going to be zero on the up axis. I think that's what I need. And then we'll set it active. So that's the top gun. So let me switch back to Unity and see if I can't populate all these things here. Okay, so we're going to want the top gun. We're going to want the front gun. And we're going to want a bullet prefab. What do I want to use for my bullet prefab? Let's see. Let me go into NinjaEggBuggy. Has a player bullet. I think I can just reuse that. And then for the player sound, the fire sound, I think I want to pull in a sound effect for this. So let's see. I look on my other window here. I think I've got a sound that will work good for this. So let me go back into the code. Say audio manager. Play level sound. Fire sound. Let's hit play and see what happens. I don't like that bullet. So I think what I'm going to do, what was that? Yeah, I think I want to use a different prefab than what I was using for NinjaEggBuggy. I mean, for NinjaEggBuggy. So let me create an empty game object. I'm going to call this buggy bullet. Reset that. Actually, I think instead of doing that, I think I'm going to drag a piece of artwork. I think what I want to use actually, is the bullet that the enemy ships use in Ninja Wars. I think I want to use this. I like this one. So I'm going to pull that in here. I'm going to call that Buggy Bullet. I'm going to give it a rigid body. And I'm going to have it ignore gravity. And I don't want it to have any drag. And I think, yeah, I need to give it a collider. So I think maybe a capsule collider would be good. Does that make sense? Let me think about that for a second. Yeah, I think a capsule collider would make sense on there. So let's see, add component, capsule collider 2D. Oops. Yeah, that looks perfect. And it looks like it's even scaled about right. So it should come out about right there and fly up. So let me create a prefab from that. Buggy bullet. Come into NinjaEggBuggy, and then instead of using player bullet, I'm going to use Buggy bullet. Now I do want it to go away at some point. So I wonder, can I reuse the bullet script that I use for my other bullets? Let's see, add component, bullet. Why do I have a line renderer or rendering? Let me just see if that works. that did not look right at all. I don't think I want to use that script. Let me remove that component. I think I want to do something different. I think I want to create a new script. Let me come into Egg Patrol. I'm going to call this bullet. Move it into the right namespace. And I'm going to want bullet speed. And I think we're going to want more force than that. And I want to give it a lifetime. We'll say it'll go away after 3 seconds. So we're going to have to keep track of how long it's been around. We're going to want a reference to our rigid body. We're going to want probably a reference to our transform. I mentioned last week, I'm not sure if I need to cache the transform, but I just do it. It's practice I've done from older versions of Unity, where I think they might cache it for you now, but it's kind of like they do the main camera. But I always cache the transform just for performance sake if I'm going to be referencing in an update. All right, so I got those. So when this is enabled, I'm going to want to set the duration to 0. So it hadn't lived any time yet. And I'm going to want to add force to it. And then in the update method, we're going to want to increment our duration. And then if it's greater than or equal to our lifetime, we're going to despawn it. And we'll despawn it using our object pooler. I think that's all we need for now. Let me go back to Unity. Let me add that script to it. Okay, that all looks good. Let me go here and make sure I've still got my buggy bullet. Okay, hit play. Okay, that is still not working correctly. Is he colliding with something? Very, very strange. I was not expecting that behavior. One thing I'm pretty sure I want to do is freeze its rotation. Reduce its lifetime too. And I wonder if maybe I need to add more force. It's still rotating, isn't it? Oh, there was something wrong with my prefab. Okay, so I think I want to be able to fire faster than that. That fire delay seems a little bit too long to me. So it's currently set to 1 second. Let's make it a half a second. I think I want to fire faster than that. Let's make it a quarter of a second. That's better. All right, let's do the front gun. So how do we want to do the front gun? Fire bullets. So we're going to want to spawn a new bullet. We're going to want to set its position to be the front gun's transformed up position. And then we're going to want to rotate it the same orientation as that front gun. So I think I want to rotate it 90 degrees to the right on the forward axis. And set it active. All right. Okay, so I've got jumping and firing working. I just got to get dying working. So, to get dying working, I need to handle colliding with a hazard layer. So, down here in handle collision, if collision.gameObject.layer equals layer mask dot name to layer hazard die. All right. What do we want to do when we die? First of all, we want to have a flag to say we're dead. So and in start game we'll set dead to false. So the first thing you want to do in die is say if dead return. So if we're already dead, we don't want to do all this stuff again. Now, what are we going to want to do? We're going to want to play a crash sound. We're going to want to spawn an explosion effect. We're going to want to despawn the buggy. And I want to spawn some debris, like bouncing wheels. And then finally, I want to tell oops, go away. I want to tell the game manager we're dead. All right, so first, if I want to play a crash sound, what are we going to want to do? We're going to want to tell the audio manager to play a level sound. And we want to play a crash sound. Well, I don't want to do that. Did it just create a method? I'm not sure what that first thing I did was. All right, so I have an audio clip here, but I want that to be a serialized field. And I want to assign it to null so that I don't get any compiler warnings. Okay. What else am I going to want to do? I want to spawn an explosion effect. So object pooler.spawn game object explosion prefab. I want to spawn it at our transform position. And rotation doesn't really matter, so we'll just do that. So I'm going to need to generate a field for that. what it's doing while I'm doing this quick action. So I'm just going to come in here and say transform, and then serialize field, game object, explosion, prefab, equal null. All right. Now, despawn the buggy. Well, that should be as simple as just saying object pooler.despawn game object this.game object. Okay, and then for spawning debris, well, let's just get this working first. I might as well go ahead and tell the game manager we're dead. Game manager dot player ship died. Let's see. What do we want to do there? I'm going to set game over to true and stop playing music. Probably good enough for now. Okay, let's go into Unity. So we want a crash sound. What am I using, or what can I use for a crash sound? I think I want to bring in a new piece of audio. Called car crash. Nice. Okay. And then I want an explosion prefab. Do I already have something that would work? All right. Let's give this a shot. Well, that's interesting. It played the sound effect, but then I got an exception, which kept it from doing everything else. Explosion prefab. It didn't like that explosion prefab. I don't like that one. Kind of have to figure out how to use the guy I like. I like that one. So let me unpack this and then drag that into here. Maybe I'll rename that and I will call it Buggy Explosion. Delete that. Delete that. Let's see if that works any better. It does not want to spawn that for some reason. Play on awake, stop action, nothing. I don't see anything wrong with that effect. Let me try one of the other explosions. Maybe something from NinjaEggBuggy. Let's see. Don't like that. Well, I don't really like that, but I'm going to see if that'll work, just to see if I can get past this error. I can go back and fix the explosion later, but I just want some kind of a explosion effect. Let me just apply these. Maybe it's just a problem with my prefab again. Well, maybe it's complaining because I didn't get my transform. Maybe if I read the error more carefully. Yeah, so let me see if that doesn't fix it. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to put it back to my desired explosion. Yes. Okay. All right. So that was just silly me. I didn't cache my transform, and I was trying to dereference it to position the explosion. But I like the way that worked. So in die, let me set this to dead because I heard two crashes, so I think it actually killed me twice, or at least twice. So the next thing I want to do is spawn debris. And so I need some debris to spawn. And I think I'm just going to spawn some tires. So I want to go back into my art for the wheels. And I want to use the same art that I'm using for the wheels. I'm going to drag this in here. I'm going to call this buggy debris. And make sure that's going to be in front of everything. Let's see, I'm going to want a rigid body. And actually, I want to create a material for this. I'm going to create a material, and I want it to be a physics material. And I want to call it bouncy wheel. So I think friction's probably fine, but I want it to have some bounciness. I'm not really sure how much. I'm going to start with 0.5. So this is going to be how much it will bounce. And I want to assign that material to my rigid body. So if I just let that wheel fall, it should bounce. Oops. I gotta give it a layer, I think. I think it should just be on the player layer. And let me move it up a little bit. And let's see if it bounces. Hello? Oh, why isn't it? Oh, I didn't add a collider. Duh. Let's add a circle collider. Actually, let me make it a... I think maybe a polygon collider would fit around the sprite better. Yeah, that'll work. Yes, it bounces. I wonder why it wasn't rotating though. At any rate, I'm going to create a prefab from that. Oh, that, yes, I wonder why it's not rotating. Very strange. Okay, so my prefab, Moon Patrol, buggy debris. I want to go into my buggy. Go into my script. And we'll add a serialized field. For buggy, or just call it debris prefab. And since there are three tires, I think I'm going to want to spawn excuse me. I think I'm going to want to spawn 3 pieces of debris. But I'm also going to want to, well, I'm already turning off the vehicle. So that should turn off the tires that are already on the vehicle. So I don't think I need to worry about that. So let me just say from 0 less than 3 increment I. Why are you putting an if in there? Visual Studio, you are not that smart. And that needs to be, oh, because I didn't tell it I wanted an integer. All right, duh. All right, so I want to spawn debris. And I actually have an override. An overload where I can specify the position and the rotation. Is that it? Is it really that simple? I think so. Oh, but you know what? It's just gonna spawn at that position. I want it to do something. So I wanted to I actually want to apply some force to it when it's spawned, because otherwise it's just going to lie there. So let me go into my scripts folder, create C# script, buggy debris. And let's see, I'm going to want serialized field for a lifetime, say 5 seconds. And for the amount of force I want to throw them with. So basically I want it to look like they come flying out of an explosion. So let's see, in the start method, see, I'm going to want a direction to spawn them, just to throw them. So we'll do random range. Just get a random number. I want to get my rigid body. Add force. And then invoke a method to deactivate it, to despawn it after its lifetime. Alright, so when it starts, I'll get a random direction. I'll add force in that direction. Then I'll tell this guy to despawn after this lifetime elapses. Let's go ahead and apply that script to our game object. Alright, let me just collapse these down so I can see what I'm doing there. Perfect. Hit play. You know, I just realized I got a piece of debris sitting on the game board. Alright. So here we go. I can shoot, I can jump. Maybe I need to assign my debris prefabs. I only saw one. Let's try that again. Okay, well, a couple of things. He seemed to collide before he ever fell in the crater, which I don't like. But the main thing is it doesn't seem to be spawning 3 wheels. Or if it is, it's spawning them in exactly the same place and giving them all the exact same amount of force. I'm going to hit the pause button I've got 3 buggy debris. There's one there. They're all 3. So I think they're all just falling, and I'm not applying any force. So let me go back to my prefab. My script is not on there. And there we go. All right, should work now. I think I'm going to move my buggy a little bit forward. Oops. So that when he dies, those wheels are more in the field of view. There we go. That looks pretty cool. Give that a shot. Yes, that's the effect I was looking for. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this stream. I apologize that my microphone was not on for most of the stream. I'm going to go back and overdub audio narration over it and then re-upload it. But anyway, if anybody tuned in, I don't know, but I apologize for that. And I had fun doing this, and I'll plan to do another stream in the not too distant future. And what I've got planned, I want to add some additional hazards. I want to add boulders, landmines. I want to have some gun turrets, laser turrets that shoot at you, that you have to jump over the bullets and you can shoot the laser turrets and destroy them. I think that would be cool. Enemy ships, of course. And then I want to have a stream where I go and refactor the code and clean it up. Try and implement some of the solid principles, single responsibility, dependency inversion, interface segregation, all those good things. So anyway, thanks so much if you tuned in or if you're watching this video after the fact. And if you did find it useful, click the like and subscribe buttons and click the notification bell so you can be notified the next time I go live or post a video. And if you have any comments or suggestions or questions, please post something in the comment section. Thanks again for watching, and good luck with your game development.